Hi guys, welcome back to the channel for another video today. Right off the bat, I want to say that today's video is going to be a little bit heavier and it is going to include topics of mental health and essay and stuff like that. So if you are somebody who is sensitive to those topics, just click out and I will see you in the next one. But I do think that it is prudent to mention all of the things regarding my story if I'm going to share my story. So yeah, take care of yourself. Your mental health is absolutely the most important. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into it. So I have had, not even gonna lie, sharing my story, my full, weight issue story from childhood on the docket on my content creation idea list for months. And there have been several times, I was looking back through my notebook, there have been several times that I have even started the process of writing an outline for this video where there's like 4 different pages in my notebook where it's just like my story. And then I never end up writing anything because I move on and I just don't want to do that. I don't want to write the outline for it. But finally, I have decided that I just need to share my story, especially since I plan to share some of your all stories. And so I think that it's only fair that I also share mine. And I do think that it can be helpful to others and that it is super, hopefully, relatable to some of you guys and can help you understand me better, because that is the goal. If we're building a community here, I feel like you guys, we all need to understand each other. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into my obesity story, the origins of it, and how I ended up being 250 plus pounds. Let's get into it. This video, I knew I was going to film this today, and I legit even went and got a coffee because I was like, you know what? I need a coffee for this. Okay, so I did not write an outline down for this, so bear with me. I think that it's going to be better if I just naturally share it all. Okay, so I am one of 6 children. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at Mercy Hospital in Pittsburgh, and I actually grew up for the first little part of my life in a pretty affluent area of Pennsylvania. If you are familiar with that area at all, a lot of northern states do this, but they have what is called townships in the Pittsburgh area. And I grew up, if you're familiar with that area, in Cranberry Township, which is, especially now, a pretty affluent part of the Pittsburgh area. It's like North Hills affluent. Like it's pretty wealthier area. Back at that time, I think that it was like a middle class area. My mom was a nurse. My dad owned a carpeting business at that time. And so we started out life in a very positive environment. We went to Catholic school and it was just a very positive experience. And then all hell broke loose, right? So I have 3 sisters and 2 older brothers, and I am the 4th child that was born into our family of 6 and my parents. So we had 8 people in our household. And, at some point, I think it just got to be so overwhelming for my parents that tracking each child and what they were going through and how they were acting just became a little bit impossible. And that's actually one of the reasons why we are not having more than 3 children, because I want to be able to 100% focus on our children based on what I went through as a child. So essentially, when I was younger, my oldest brother started to exhibit signs of mental health issues. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of his problems because that's his story and it's his thing to share, but it does play a role in my story. So I have to mention at least part of it. So he started to exhibit some signs of schizophrenia, which is eventually what he would end up being diagnosed with. But at that time in the early 90s, it just wasn't something that people were watching out for. What mental health at that time was just a disaster. It still isn't much better. But it was not caught. It just wasn't caught. And so one of the ways that my oldest brother that his mental issues manifested was through doing inappropriate things with me and pretty much all of my other siblings. But again, their stories to share. We're focusing on mine. So I was the one that was the most targeted from a very young age. I was about 5 when it started, and it did not end until he moved out of the house. He's 7 years older than me. And so I was like 12 or 13, probably 12 when it ended. So 7 years of my life, that was something that went on. There are so many different stories that I've heard now as an adult where my parents did kind of notice something, or they did pick up on something and they had conversations with him. And ultimately, there's just so many things that could have been done differently within that whole situation, and they weren't. And I, as an adult, have just had to learn to forgive and move past. One of the things, we're going to get into the fat part of this, obviously, but one of the things that I have, as an adult, had to realize and understand is that certain people in my life, specifically my father's passed, so he's can't really relate to this now as I've discovered it most recently, but with my mother, there's just some things that she can't provide for me. And I've had to let that go in order to have a relationship with her. You know, he is her son. She knows about all of this, but she's in this position where she has a daughter as a victim and a child as a perpetrator. And it's got to be a very difficult position to be in. And so I've realized at some point in my life that there's just some things she's not going to be able to give me because of the position that she's in. So, while I do think there are so many things that could have been done differently within my childhood that could have kept me safer and ultimately could have kept him safer in a mental state type of way, I just don't know that it's beneficial now to be trashing anybody because, again, at this point, I'm a 36-year-old woman who is responsible for her own life. So that being said, I had to share that happened because it significantly drives my obesity story. So when we were in Pennsylvania, I was very actually healthy. My whole family was. We played softball and baseball. And so we were at the park most nights, the ball field, and we would play 2 or 3 games. And if we weren't playing, we were running around while everybody else was playing and that sort of thing. So we were very healthy. Then my father decided that he was going to move us to North Carolina because he knew that he was a realtor, he became a realtor, and the realty business was booming in this area. And so we moved down here. We all quit our sports. And so obviously we started to put on a little bit of weight, but that's not necessarily what happened to me. Okay. So I'm starting to put some weight on. And when we moved to North Carolina is actually when the abuse really picked up. I think that, I can't speculate obviously, but I do think that he was uncomfortable in a new area. And so he, was doing things that it manifested in certain ways. And I do think that one of the ways was the abuse of me. And later I would learn several of my other siblings. But I, like I said, was the main target. And I always was, if there was a choice, it was me. And so, that was a very big issue, obviously going into my, preteen years, like 9, 10, 11. And so this is where we lead to the point where I really became fat. When I started to put on a little bit of weight after we moved to North Carolina and I hit puberty. And so obviously my body started to change. And so I started to put on a little bit of weight. I very quickly noticed that I was left alone more. The more weight I gained, the more I developed, which I now know, again, we could go into things with that. Maybe that just isn't what the interest was. But in my mind at that time, I get heavier, I develop more, I get left alone. And so it became this protection. And I used it for a long time. And it wasn't necessarily just with him. I can remember an instance where my father actually, my father has a whole bunch of his own stuff, but one comment that my father made to my mother when I was probably 12 was that if I would lose 20 pounds, I could be a supermodel. And I remember, first off, my dad said this to my mom on a date, and then my mom found it smart to come and tell me that. So again, so many things that could have been done differently. But she told me that, and I remember thinking, well, I don't want to be a supermodel. I don't want to draw attention to myself in any way from men, especially. So like, I'm not going to do that. I'll just gain 20 pounds instead of lose 20 pounds, right? So that cycle continued throughout my teenage years. I never dated throughout my teenage years. Any attention that I would get from any man in any way, I projected my trauma on. And so I started to, even if it was something innocent, like my dad wanting me to sit on his lap and watch TV with him, like my mind ultimately tried to find some type of negative part to that. And that was through, teachers, through anything. I can remember in middle school, I had a health teacher who paid me a lot of attention, I would say, but he was a young guy. Like, I don't think there was anything necessarily negative about it, but I remember in my mind thinking like, oh, he must be like my brother. He must be like that. And so I would label people, and any man that gave me any type of attention was bad. And so I tried to hide under my weight and under not putting any thought into makeup or hair. I've mentioned that I'm learning hair and makeup now as a 36-year-old woman, because at the time throughout my teenage years, when most girls are doing that, I was hiding in a shell in baggy clothes, getting fatter because I didn't want to be seen by anybody because of what I had been through. Once he moved out of the house, it's still like this cycle of what had been done to me continued for many, many, many years. He would go on to be diagnosed as schizophrenic and continue to punch back in at different times in life. He would call me fat. And I remember he walked in the door one day. I was at my mom's house, and he walked in, this after my parents divorced, and he walked in the door one day and he said, "Wow, you got fat." And I was like, yeah. I was happy. Like, I was happy that there was no interest. And so I very much so used my weight and used gaining weight and destroyed my body throughout my childhood and early adult life in order to avoid attention from men. I met my husband, I met Chris when I was 18 years old, and it was just different with him from the very start. Like, I never had any reclusiveness feeling. I didn't want to retract from Chris ever. And so that's ultimately how I knew that he was the one for me, because it was immediately not like that. But with anybody else, I was not one of those women that turned around and became really promiscuous after abuse. I was one that tried to make myself as ugly as possible through weight gain and through not wearing makeup and through not brushing my hair. Like, I tried to keep people away from me. A good comparison that I want to make is, if you've seen people talking about Amanda Bynes now, how she is so drastically different in her look from when she was as a teenager. And there's even people online that'll make comments that she is she is taking control in the way of making herself unattractive to men, or as unattractive as she thinks she can make herself. And I think that's exactly what I did. I made myself unattractive through gaining a significant amount of weight. Now, again, he was in my life. So nobody even knew what had really happened until I was about to get married. So 2 weeks before I was about to get married is when he was diagnosed, and he decided to come out and tell everybody everything he had done wrong in the world. And that was obviously the biggest one. So he announced it at a family dinner, and that so many things that destroyed my relationship with my father, because he felt like I should have told him, which maybe I should have. Why do victims do the things they do? Who knows? And so my father actually never forgave me, and it was a whole thing, but he ended up controlling much of my life and much of my relationship with my mom for up until I started Mounjaro. So a very long time. And so when I started on Mounjaro and when I started to lose weight, I, again, was 250 pounds, and I had done this to myself from trying to avoid all contact from men. And I liked the negative contact that I would get from men. Like, I wanted you to tell me that you didn't find me attractive. And that's how I was forever. I wanted you to say like you're still not, but you weren't especially then going to hurt my feelings by saying you're fat, you need to lose weight, you're ugly, you're annoying, whatever. Like those were compliments to me because I wanted you to think that, because I didn't want you to touch me or come near me or advance on me. I didn't want that. So I relished in the negative comments. They made me happy. Okay. So I started to lose the weight and a lot of stuff went down. Again, his story, but I cut contact off with him. That was so I started my journey in November of 2022. I cut him off officially. The final time that I talked to him was in January 2023. And since then, I have not had any contact with him at all. And I have never been happier and less anxious in my entire life. I know that my mom still has contact with him. Obviously, it's her son. And my mom and I just don't talk about him, and we just don't talk about that situation. Again, like I said in the beginning of this video, I learned that there's some stuff that she just can't provide me with. And that was a lot of therapy to get me to that point, to accepting that there's some stuff that she just can't help me with, and that I have to find other people. For me, Chris is that person to talk to about these issues and to fill that void that I have through not receiving that from my own mother. I don't know that my father would be able to provide that for me if he was still alive, because of, again, it ruined our relationship after that. So now where I'm at is that I will hear a lot of positive comments now. Okay. And like, in real life, on YouTube, I'll get comments, and for a while, my first instinct was to like recluse and like feel grossed out by these comments, innocent comments that people were making. And I had to do a lot of work within myself to be able to accept compliments, because I had spent my whole life. So, my story is a little bit different, because I never really wanted, as a young adult and teenager, to be thin, because I didn't want that, because I didn't want to look good and get attention. So for me, I have a story that's a little bit different than a lot of you, where you're like, oh, I tried to lose weight my whole life and I could never lose weight and I just would gain it back. I didn't start doing that until I was in like my late 20s, when I decided that I wanted to lose weight and I wanted to feel better. And mostly that was for my family and my children, and being able to, play with my kids and keep up with them and all of that. But in my young adulthood, I was happy to be fat. I wanted to be fat and be unnoticed. And so that's what I did to myself. I actually think I got through this pretty well. I, again, have been dreading making this, because I don't know what people are going to have to say about it. Because essentially what I was fat on purpose, right? Until it got to the point where I had wrecked my body through insulin problems and, wrecking my metabolism and just destroying my body from the inside out, to now I'm at the point where I can't control without the tool of a GLP-1, which has saved my life. Absolutely saved my life. And I had food noise. I think that a lot of it I did to myself in my teen and early adult years. I think I caused the problem. That's something that I am 100% will admit, but also something that I know that isn't everybody's problem. I just know that that's personally what happened to me, that I created my own problem, that it got to the point where I knew that unless I asked for help in some way, I was never going to be able to fix it. And so enter GLP-1s, and the magic that they are and what they have done for my life is just, it's the best. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I am a lifer. I've said it a million times. I'm a lifer. So let me know your thoughts, of course, down below. I always welcome your thoughts and your opinions on everything, but be kind, because this, again, took me a lot to share. And I know I didn't share a lot of specific details, but, ultimately my oldest brother, I have forgiven him now, because you have to. I think that you have to forgive, but for a long time, he ruined my life. And I do still say he ruined my childhood. And he ruined the relationship with my father, and he put a mask over the relationship with my mother. And so he definitely affected me greatly in my life and the person that I've become. And so people will ask me sometimes, like, how are you confident? Or so confident, even when I was like really overweight, I was confident in myself. And how are you so outspoken and you're so like genuinely okay with being yourself? And the reason is because I've had to not be myself and I've had to hide for so long that now it's like, you can't hold me down. Like I'm gonna do what I want. I have this personality that flourished out of it that I think is the best that could have come out of it, because it could have been really bad and it wasn't. So yeah, let me know your thoughts, of course, but be kind. If you want to be on the channel, please, of course, every time, the end of the video, the dogs are crazy. Shoot me an email. I have a few people on the docket, a few people that I've reached out to that I'm waiting to hear back from, but let me know if you want to come on and have a good open conversation about your journey with me and share it with all of the community. I would love to, get as many people on here as possible. I'd love to make it a weekly thing if we could. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned a little bit about me. Maybe you can relate to some aspects of my story. Hopefully not the bad ones, because I don't wish that on anybody. But yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great day, guys. Bye.